Summer 1944. The air in Europe was intoxicated with hope and the smell of gunpowder. Just a few weeks earlier, on June 6th, the Allies had achieved the impossible. They had clawed their way onto Nazi Germany's Atlantic Wall, opening the long-awaited Second Front. Now, after a bloody meat grinder in the hedgerow labyrinth of the Bocage, Operation Cobra had finally broken through the German defenses. The armored spearheads of General George S. Patton's Third Army, as if launched from a sling, surged deep into France. Their speed was phenomenal, 30, 50, sometimes 70 kilometers a day. On August 25, Paris fell. Allied forces drove the enemy eastward with such fury that it seemed the war would soon be over. Victory was not just close. You could touch it, breathe it in, with the dust of the French roads. And then, at the very peak of this triumphant charge, the steel fist poised to crush the Reich began to unclench. The mighty Allied war machine, which had ground elite SS divisions to dust, came to a standstill. Sherman tanks, each consuming nearly 400 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers, stood in the fields like useless steel boxes. Trucks carrying ammunition and blood plasma were frozen on the roadsides. The artillery fell silent. The reason was not a desperate Wehrmacht counterattack. It was mundane, humiliating, and utterly fatal. The army had run out of gas. General Omar Bradley, one of the chief architects of the offensive, would later utter a phrase that perfectly described the horror of the situation. Our plans on the battlefield are limited by only one thing: the supply of fuel. In August 1944, the Allies' enemy was not the German soldier. Their main enemy was distance. The problem was a paradox. The army had become a hostage to its own incredible success. Its supply lines, stretched from the front back to the initial beachheads in Normandy, snapped like an over-tightened string. Everything essential, from a single bullet to a surgical needle, was still being unloaded at the temporary Mulberry harbors and directly onto Omaha and Utah beaches. From there to Patton's vanguard, which was already approaching the Moselle River, was a distance of over 600 kilometers. And these were not modern highways. These were roads battered by years of occupation and months of targeted Allied bombing. The railway network, the steel web that could have solved the problem, lay in ruins. It had been systematically destroyed before the invasion to prevent the Germans from moving reserves. Now, that strategy was coming back to haunt them. The offensive, on which the outcome of the war in Europe depended, was choking on dust and inaction. It was then, in a moment of extreme desperation, that an idea was born in the high command, an idea insane in its scale and brilliant in its simplicity. If cargo couldn't be moved by rail, then the highways themselves would have to become the railroad. Thus began one of the most ambitious, risky, and heroic logistical operations in history, an operation you have likely never read about in textbooks. Its code name, the Red Ball Express. The name was taken from railroad jargon. A red ball designated top priority freight that had to move to its destination without a single stop. On August 25, 1944, the plan was put into action. Two major highways in France, leading east from Cherbourg, were completely commandeered by the army. All civilian and non-essential military traffic was banned under threat of court-martial. One highway became a giant one-way artery, pumping the blood of war to the front. The second became a vein, through which empty trucks returned for another load. It was a convoy of unprecedented scale. Imagine an endless, unbroken snake of nearly 6,000 2.5-ton GMC CCKW trucks, the famous Jimmies or Deuce and a Halves. They became the workhorses of this operation. Reliable and durable, but with no power steering and a stiff suspension, they exhausted their drivers to the absolute limit. The columns moved 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Along the road, signs with a bright red ball were posted to guide the way, ensuring no one got lost in the chaos. The rules were draconian. The speed was strictly 40 kilometers per hour, about 25 miles per hour, no faster, no slower. The distance between vehicles was 55 meters, about 60 yards, to prevent a single air attack from taking out multiple trucks. Stopping was forbidden, absolutely. If you had a flat tire or an overheating engine, you pulled over to the shoulder and waited. Hundreds of your comrades would rush past you because the conveyor belt could not stop. Military police stood at every intersection for days on end, deafened by the roar of engines directing the ceaseless flow. So who was behind the wheel of these machines? They were not elite long-haul truckers. Amid a severe manpower shortage, anyone who could be spared was enlisted as a driver for the express, cooks, clerks, signalmen, combat engineers. Many were transferred from rear echelon units where, at best, they had driven a light Jeep. They learned to handle a heavy, fully loaded truck on the fly, on war-torn roads, under monstrous pressure. Their only mission was to get the cargo from point A to point B at any cost. And the cost was unimaginably high. The main enemy of these men was not a German sniper hiding in the ruins of a farmhouse. It wasn't even a Luftwaffe pilot who had broken through the screen of Thunderbolts and Mustangs, although both posed a mortal threat. A truck filled to the brim with high-octane gasoline or packed with crates of artillery shells was a bomb on wheels. One direct hit, one tracer bullet, and the truck, along with its driver, would vanish in a fireball, leaving only a black stain on the asphalt. The main, most insidious enemy was sleep. To maintain the pace, command demanded drivers stay behind the wheel for 18, 20, and sometimes even 48 hours without proper rest. They survived on pep pills, Benzedrine, and liters of black coffee handed out at makeshift Red Cross stations. But chemistry could not cheat nature forever. Drivers fell asleep at the wheel. The phenomenon earned a grim nickname, ghost riding. A man could drive for several miles completely unconscious, operating the multi-ton vehicle on pure muscle memory. He would be jolted awake by veering into a ditch, slamming into the tailgate of the truck ahead, or by the desperate scream of his co-driver. Many never woke up at all. And here we arrive at the most important and most uncomfortable fact about this operation. A fact that, for decades, was carefully omitted from the official history of the victory. Approximately 75% of all drivers in the Red Ball Express were African American. In 1944, the U.S. Army was a deeply segregated institution. Black soldiers lived in separate barracks, ate in separate mess halls, and served in separate units. They were not trusted to fight on the front lines, deemed incapable of complex combat roles. Their lot was construction battalions, port duties, and transportation companies. And now, at the most critical moment of the war, when everything depended on logistics, the fate of the entire European campaign rested in the hands of these very men. Men who were fighting for freedom and democracy in Europe while being denied basic civil rights back home. This was the essence of the Double V campaign, a motto in the African American community: victory over fascism abroad and victory over racism at home. Every day, they climbed into the cabs of their Jimmies, driven by this dual purpose. They proved their patriotism not with loud slogans, but with grueling, deadly, dangerous work. They hauled fuel for all-white tank crews. They delivered ammunition for artillerymen who would never sit at the same table with them in the mess hall. They were fighting two wars at once, one against Nazi Germany and another against a system that treated them as second-class citizens. Their heroism was quiet, anonymous, covered in a layer of road dust and diesel fumes. There were no medals of honor or newspaper headlines waiting for them, but they performed a miracle. In its 83 days of existence, from August 25th to November 16, 1944, the Red Ball Express delivered over 4,000 to 12,000 tons of supplies: gasoline, shells, rations, spare parts, medicine, everything needed for life and death. On peak days, the drivers transported up to 12,500 tons. It was enough. Patton's tanks roared back to life and surged forward. The cannon spoke again, raining tons of steel on German fortifications. The offensive was saved. The artery of supply, created by the ingenuity of staff officers and paid for with the blood, sweat, and sleepless nights of ordinary drivers, allowed the Allies to reach the very border of Germany and prepare for the final push to Berlin. The Red Ball Express is more than a story about trucks and gasoline. It is a story of human endurance, of overcoming unimaginable hardship, and of profound injustice. It proves that wars are won not only by soldiers on the front lines, they are won by the quiet heroism of those we often overlook: the supply clerks, the mechanics, the rear echelon troops. The feat of these drivers is a tribute to the vast and complex organism of the military, without which the front is merely a showcase. They didn't storm bunkers or charge with bayonets, but their contribution to victory was no less significant. They were the very lifeblood that flowed through the arteries of the roads to the heart of the enemy, keeping the mighty Allied war machine from grinding to a halt. And the next time you read about the swift advance across France, remember those nameless, sleep-deprived heroes behind the wheels of dusty trucks. Remember the men who saved the victory while remaining in its shadow.